Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We are here. We are still talking about George Orwell's 1984. And what I would like to talk about today is our main character, our point of view character, Winston Smith. I want to talk about him as a protagonist, what Orwell has done with him, what Orwell hasn't done with him, and what Winston Smith should mean to us, the reader. What should we really take away from Winston after reading this book? So why don't we get started? Winston Smith is... Here's what we know about Winston Smith from the book, the facts of Winston Smith. We know that he had a mother and a little sister, and a father, and they're all dead. We know that he works for the Ministry of Truth. The Ministry of Truth, in case you're not familiar with it, is the huge central department that basically determines what the truth is. It determines the reality of the world in which they live. It writes and produces books and newspapers and movies and pretty much any kind of informational exchange is the Ministry of Truth. And one of his many jobs is to rewrite things that are, or to rectify things, as the party would put it, that are incorrect. So, for example, let's say last week it was printed in the Times from the Ministry of Plenty that the boots production for the third quarter would be 55 million boots, but actually they only produced 40 million boots. Winston's job is to go back to that edition of the Times and to rewrite it so that the Ministry of Plenty's prediction would be correct. Rectify. We know that he is single. Oh, no, that is not entirely true. He has a wife, Catherine, who he has not seen in quite some time. They are separated. The party does not permit divorce. They do permit separation if there's no chance of having a child. We know that he lives in Victory Mansions. We know that he is sick. He's in his high 30s. High 30s, that's weird. Late 30s, let's call it that. That's much better. That's what a normal person would say, right? He's in his late 30s. He is not in very good health. He's got varicose veins on his ankle. He is smoking all the time. He's an alcoholic, almost certainly. He's really in very poor shape. If you look at him, he basically is just too thin. His work is overall sort of hang off him. He's in very bad shape, Winston Smith is. And during the course of the book, for all of that, Winston has a question. Winston has one central question for this whole book that he really wants to have answered. And that is, it's actually a very political question. Are we really better off today than we were in the past? That's what he wants to know. Because he looks around, and the very first paragraph of the book makes this place look awful. There's dust everywhere in this book. There's dust in the very first page, dust being blown about by the wind. We see his neighbor, Mrs. Parsons, who has these deep wrinkles and creases in her face, and he believes that she actually has dust in her face. There's one point where he's at work, and he pulls off his SpeakWrite machine, and he blows dust out of the speaking mechanism. For some reason, there's dust everywhere. There's posters hanging on the wall that aren't properly fixed up. His elevator doesn't work. Nobody can get basic things like razors or cigarettes. Mrs. Parsons' sink is always clogged up. Everything is bad. Life is not good. And Winston, keep in mind, is a member of the party. It's the outer party, yeah, but the party, the organization that controls everything. And his life is awful. And he wants to know, is life now really better under party leadership than it used to be prior to that? And that is really his central question for the whole book. And it's what drives him forward, is trying to figure that out. And he talks to a man in a bar who's an old man who he thinks, well, that man clearly is old enough to remember the revolution. He tries to get something out of that old guy, but the old guy is incredibly drunk, and we don't know if anything he says is to be taken literally. Winston has his own memories of hiding from a nuclear bombing. Apparently a nuclear bomb was dropped on, I think, Colchester, and hiding in the underground with his family. And he has some memories of stealing chocolate from his mom and his sister, and then he ran away, and that's kind of it. He doesn't really know, and he wants to know. And that pursuit of the truth reveals that the party has basically been rewriting history, something that, again, he is perfectly complicit in. And the realization that he will never know the truth. And that drives him more and more towards some concept of rebellion. He wants to rebel. He wants to strike a blow against Big Brother. He wants to be something. He wants to be some part of the downfall of the party. He doesn't believe for an instant that he is going to bring the party down or that it's going to happen in his lifetime, but he wants to at least be part of it. And he meets this girl, Julia, who works in the fiction writing section, and they become lovers. And Julia doesn't really care about bringing down the party. She just enjoys being bad, i.e. thinking for herself and having sex. But they then meet O'Brien, who is a member of the inner party, and O'Brien kind of draws them into this and says, yes, there is a revolution. Yes, there is a book about this, and you can be part of it. You can be part of that. If you promise to do whatever we tell you, no matter how horrible it is, you can be part of it. And Winston agrees, because he thinks he's going to be a hero. He thinks someday the party will fall and he will have played a part in it. And then he's caught, captured, broken, destroyed, and he loves Big Brother, in the end. And so I ask myself, when I'm reading this book, and when I'm reading a lot of books, is why did the author do this and not something else? We have this totalitarian state run in totality by the party. And Orwell needed a protagonist to guide us through the party and guide us through this world that he's created. Why make such a weak, fragile, frail, sometimes kind of pathetic man our protagonist? Why not make a proper sort of action hero, going in and swinging through, from rooftop to rooftop and blowing up helicopters, and the big climactic scene where he kicks open the door and there's Big Brother with his big mustache standing behind a desk going, "How dare you!" And he says, I don't know, he comes up with a catchphrase. I should have thought of this earlier, but he comes up with a really good catchphrase and he guns down Big Brother, and that's the end of it. Because that's not the story Orwell was trying to tell. For one thing, it would not have been believable. All those action heroes, they're gone. And that's something that I think is important to note. The party, over however long it's been in power, which I think I mathed out to like 50 years or so, would have definitely gotten rid of anybody who comes close to sort of that action figure paradigm. They would all be gone. Anybody even close to similar to that would be gone. The party has pruned away all of the great, magnificent, brave, courageous people. And despite their propaganda, which is very, very sort of Nazi Aryan-ish in that the propagandistic version of a good party member is this tall, strong, healthy, chisel-chinned blonde, most of the party functionaries are these like small, beetle-like, frail people who just keep the machinery working. No individual matters. The party matters. The individuals don't. And that's why individuals are so easily disposed of. So I think that's why Orwell chose Winston to be our protagonist, because there wasn't anybody else to choose. Winston was just as good a choice as anybody else. And again, to sort of give us a little hint at how degenerate Oceania has become, because all the heroes are gone. All the heroes are very definitely dead, or they are fictional. So there is that. Winston does evolve. I mean, he begins the book in fear as he starts writing in his diary about his thoughts and his memories. He does evolve. He does take more chances. He does eventually make a decision to formally join the resistance when he meets O'Brien. And he does try to hold out when he gets brought to the Ministry of Love. He really, really does. It's a long section, that last section of the book. And you're kind of surprised by how well Winston is held out. But nobody can really hold out against the Ministry of Love, especially not in Room 101. And so we do see Winston trying to become more active, trying to become more aware. When he's talking to Julia, who is about a decade younger than he is, and Julia is only really interested, again, like I said, in breaking the rules. She has one really good line that I like that I've actually sort of taken to heart, which is that if you keep the small rules, you can break the big rules. And for her, keeping the small rules means speaking correctly, acting correctly in your day-to-day life, wearing the anti-sex sash, all of that stuff that she's supposed to do. If you keep the small rules, you can break the big rules. I kind of like that. I'm not really a rule breaker myself in a lot of ways, but I like that anyway. And he tries to pressure her into it. He tries reading her Goldstein's book that basically outlines the way the party functions. And she just falls asleep. She doesn't care. Winston cares. Winston wants to be part of something bigger than himself in a meaningful way. He doesn't want to be a disposable cog in the machine of the Ministry of Truth, which is what he is. He wants to be part of the downfall of the party, the downfall of Big Brother. He can't be. Not in the way that he thinks he is. We don't even know if, we mentioned in the last video that the Principles of Newspeak essay at the end of the book implies that the party does eventually fall. We have no way of knowing if Winston Smith had anything to do with that. It's entirely possible that Winston Smith lived and died and made no appreciable effect on anything ever. Ever. So, what does Winston Smith mean to us? What does Winston mean to us, the readers? I don't know. If you find yourself reading the book and you're sort of identifying with Winston Smith, then I think you've got a lot of things to think through, because you probably shouldn't be. It's not really healthy to identify with Winston Smith because, again, he's not in a good place. However, I think if we take the idea that a political struggle is based in the individual, an individual struggle is a political struggle, then we can start to see Winston Smith almost heroically. He knew what the consequences of his actions were. The moment he bought the blank diary, the moment he started writing down his ideas in secret, the moment he confided in Julia, the moment he and Julia went out to the woods to have sex under the tree. All of these moments, he knew what was coming. He knew what was going. He knew that each one of these meant death for him. And yet he persisted to steal a line from an earlier political era in the U.S. And still he persisted. He knew that he would not succeed. He knew that it would not be possible for him to succeed. But he tried. And I think maybe the lesson that we take away from Winston is that you gotta try. You may not succeed. You may die in the attempt. But nevertheless, you have to look at your political journey as an individual, as a person in a society, and decide what role you want to play. Do you want to be the mindless, duck-speaking guy in the cafeteria who just regurgitates party propaganda all the time and doesn't think about it? Do you want to be Symes, who's actively working to help the party destroy people's minds? Do you want to be Parsons, the eternal boy child who just is the poster boy for the good citizen who eventually gets turned in by his kids? Who do you want to be in any political system? Winston Smith is maybe not the ideal. You would love, I think, again, I would love to just be the swashbuckling, hero. But maybe Winston Smith is what you can do. You can do what is possible for you to do on a personal level without expectation of reward. I think this is important. Without expectation of success. But knowing that you have done what you can to try and effect political change. I think for me, that's the lesson that I get from Winston Smith. It's not a very cheerful lesson. It's not a terribly optimistic lesson because most of it ends in failure. There's no way around that. But if I were to take a lesson away from Winston and who he is, that would have to be it. So, those are my thoughts on Winston Smith. If you've got thoughts on Winston, I would love to hear what those thoughts are. I think they are probably very interesting. Again, I'm sure people have written whole master's theses on Winston Smith. I'm not going to do that. I don't have that kind of time. But thank you for stopping by. We will go on to our next topic in the next video. In the meantime, stay well, and I will see you next time.